Hey, what is going on, Guardians? Nem with Planet Destiny here, and today we're going to be taking a look at all of the narrative previews that recently went live on Bungie.net. Season of the Drifter is upon us, and with it we're getting a lot more lore on the rogue Lightbearer that runs Gambit introduced in Forsaken. In the Vidoc that was released recently, we get a small preview that the Drifter is running a new Gambit mode called Gambit Prime. He seemed to be running it from his derelict ship and seems to have parted ways with the tower for reasons that we may see soon. In the first narrative preview, we see that the Drifter is laying on the charm on a Titan called Joxer to get him to test the new Gambit Prime. Now there's not a whole lot to dissect here other than Joxer mentions us as the hero of the Red War, and that a lot of Guardians are out there with malfeasance, and apparently including his grandma. Now, there is a lot to unpack on the second narrative preview called The Reckoning, as we see previews of the Gambit Prime armor pinnacle perks, and a grief-stricken Joxer as he deals with the loss of his fire team testing out Gambit Prime. In the back and forth between the Titan and the Drifter, he asks how the armor treated him in the match, and Joxer replies that it works how the Drifter said it would. When Joxer invaded, the enemy team's bank shut down and he started draining their moats. Drifter then asks if his fire team helped him out, to which Joxer replied, "The Warlock watched our bank. He always seemed to know where the invader was," which we know now to be the Sentry role. And the Hunter, she was a beast, tore those Cabal up like they were made of paper, which would be their Reaper, and he then mentions that their other Titan was a Collector, that he hid and collected a bunch of motes and sent the meanest taken he's ever seen, which we now know it takes 20 motes of dark to do so. Drifter then tries to buy Joxer's silence by gifting him the Invader armor, but with the guilt of the permanent death of 3 Guardians on him, he leaves in silence. We then get a glimpse of a ghost that recorded the match for the Drifter. Now the interesting thing about this is that they mentioned that the ghost had a glowing red eye. Now we've only seen this once elsewhere, and that was when Ashramir was first referenced in the hospital bay when he was infected by the Vex in the Grimoire card, Ghost Fragment Eris Morn. It states, "A small transplex window sat in one wall of the room. Hovering there eerily still was a ghost. Its single eye reflected against the inside of the window, a steady red glow." Now, I'm not entirely sure on how corruption affects ghosts, but this is twice now that we've seen ghosts with glowing red eyes that are tied to Guardians that either have strayed from the Traveler or gotten corrupted by the minions of the dark. For the third narrative preview called Praxic Order, we see Drifter work his charm and glimmer to convince a maintenance worker by the name of Lionel to let the Drifter finish sweeping the petals from the Crimson Days event that just passed. As a side note here, I'd like to mention that I love these narrative previews are acknowledging in-game events. It gives a sense of time properly passing and the feeling that the events for the players is reflected in the lore. Now I would love to see these narrative previews as CGI cutscenes someday, but anyways, back to it. Drifter manages to score Lionel's attire and broom and meanders his way to eavesdrop on a meeting that involves the city factions, the Vanguard, and the Praxic Order of Warlocks. Now the purpose of this meeting is that the Praxic Order wants to get rid of the Drifter from the tower, because since his arrival, Guardians are toying with artifacts of darkness and even sporting the title of Dredgen. Again, another perfect example of acknowledging in-game achievements in the lore. Now Zavala seems to be perfectly fine with Drifter's stay in the tower, saying, "The Drifter poses no immediate threat to the population, therefore we motion to grant him a more permanent lease," to which Warlock Aunar Mahal of the Praxic Order defies. "My order disagrees. I have paperwork to file, so I'll make this short. If the Vanguard is willing, the Praxic Order would like to excise the Drifter from the city immediately." Zavala tries to defend the decision by mentioning that the city welcomes all of humanity who are willing to defend the city, even calling the Drifter a Guardian, and Aunar replies he is no Guardian, and that the Praxic Order believes that the Drifter is just as much as a threat as Gaul or even Oryx, the Taken King. Which is understandable, since in Gambit we as Guardians are sending Taken over to kill other Guardians, and as we saw in the previous narrative, even permanently kill them. Aunar says that the Drifter has convinced the Guardian population to use the Taken as a weapon to murder Guardians, and Zavala retorts that there have been no final deaths. But of course, we now know that there have been. Aunar's final message to the Vanguard and city factions is an important one. Some have adopted the name Dredgen. You want my professional opinion? Ideas are powerful things, and the Drifter has too many. Bored that travesty, he calls a ship and throw him out of an airlock before the city sees another dark age. She leaves the meeting by walking past a maintenance worker who had fallen asleep with a hat over his eyes, which obviously we know to be the Drifter. In the Murder of Cayde-6 follows the Drifter to a Jensen lab as he disguises himself as a warlock using a newly acquired duster and an obsidian mind, which was an exotic back in Destiny 1. The fact that they mention it makes me wonder if they plan on bringing it back, although it would have to have different perks, since they gave Skull of Dire Ahamkara the perks from Obsidian Mind. But anyways, back to the story. Drifter is posing as a warlock to gain access to the lab where Aunor is playing back the last moments of the former Hunter Vanguard, Cayde-6. They greet each other, and she mentions that she won't be long in the room, and Drifter tells her to take her time. Aunor watches up until the moment Sundance is shot, and the Drifter is perplexed as to how a scorn weapon could have destroyed a ghost. Aunor asks the AI in the room, cause of death? And the AI replied, Sundance appears to be the victim of a single catastrophic wound from a Devourer bullet, modified to shoot from a Scorn launcher, projectile classified as ontological. She asks the AI, define Devourer bullet, to which it replies, payload matches the ballistics of a weapon of sorrow or a comparable hive implement. She finally asks the Drifter what he thought of the situation, and he mentions that the Mindbender had built an Ascendant throne, that if he managed that, making an ontological bullet would be simpler. But as we know, the throne world was built upon the death of Cayde-6, not before, because that's how the Hive's sword logic works. She asks the Drifter's name, to which he says it's Finch, which be obvious to us as a lie, but he asks her why she's investigating this, and her shocking response is, I'm investigating the possible involvement of the hero of the Red War in the death of Cayde-6, which is incredibly shocking for us as the Guardian to see that the Praxic Order is investigating us regarding the death of the Vanguard. Before the Drifter leaves, he poses one last question. And what actually happens if the Saint turns out to be a sinner? Aunor replies, the Praxic Order doesn't hesitate, doesn't stop. If we can prove you've done demonstrable harm to humanity or the city, doesn't matter how far or how fast you run, we'll catch you, and you'll face Praxic fire. Now the Drifter takes his leave and she resumes playing the video. Finally, we have the job, which is a bit lighter on details, but some of the implications here are pretty big. We see Ikora, Aunor, and Ophiuchus, Ikora's ghost. Aunor and Ophiuchus are talking back and forth about knowing that the Drifter has been eavesdropping on them and that Aunor wants to shoot him with a shotgun, but Ikora puts those thoughts to a quick halt, telling them that the Vanguard needs the Drifter. Aunor then proceeds to mention that Cayde died on a random Tuesday, and that the Vanguard just took our word for it, which explains why she was previously going through Sundance's video feed. In a tense moment between the two, Ikora asks if she found anything, which of course she didn't, except for the fact that the Barons were able to craft a thorn-like bullet to shoot Sundance. Now the interesting part here is that Aunor finally comes to realize that we are to be trusted, but she says, you know I have the Vanguard's best interest in mind, and now that I know our hero can be trusted, maybe I found the help I need. To do what? Ikora asks. To save you from yourselves. It remains my honor to be your hidden, but there are lines I will never cross, not for you, not for the Order. Do you trust me to do my job? Ikora replies, always. I, the Vanguard, ask that you do the same. And Aunor replies, always. So Aunor knows something that Ikora doesn't, and with that fact that Uldren is now a Lightbearer, who knows what Bungie will do to tie him into the story. But that's going to be it for the video today, Guardians. There's a lot to process here, and there's a lot more that we're going to get in the coming weeks following the release of Season of the Drifter. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys think that the lore is going to unfold, and if you're going to take the Vanguard side or the Drifter side once the Allegiance quest goes live. Thank you for watching the video today, and we'll see you next time.